Good morning. My name is Kathryn McEwan and I'm the global lead of Working with Resilience. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to talk to you today as school system leaders and school leaders about this topic of resilience at work. While I'm based in South Australia, I do have a very good Scottish name, McEwan, as you can see, and I'm also a past neighbour as I'm Welsh. So I'm going to talk to a few slides. So what I'll do is I'll get them up right now so that we can look. And let's get started. So I want to start just talking, first of all, about this word resilience. It's a very popular word right now, of course, and one that resonates with all leaders, especially those like you who have very complex and demanding jobs. I guess the problem with the popularity of the word is that everyone has a version of what it means. And even the researchers disagree. And at last count, there were well over 140 definitions. If you ask people, mostly they'll describe it as being tough and bouncing back. But we all know there's only so much bouncing back you can do until you hit the wall. For us at Working with Resilience, we conceptualize it as being on top of the everyday pressures, but also adapting to change and proactively positioning around future challenges. It's much more than persevering and bouncing back. So if you were to reflect today, it's about looking in. What are your current role pressures that you need to be on top of? It's looking out, having that sort of external radar, if you like, which you can use to determine how you need to adapt to the changes around you. And it's also looking forwards. It's looking to the horizon and thinking about how do you proactively position yourselves and your school system for the future as much as you can with the uncertainty that we have at the moment. So I like to think of resilience in the workplace as about being able to sustain our performance and our well-being. So we need to do both. After all, it is a job and it is a system that we need to sustain for the benefit of students. But we need to do this not only individually, but we need to do this collectively. As an organizational psychologist, I always look at things through a systems lens, and we know from research that we simply can't achieve a resilient school culture without taking a systemic approach. So let's explore what it looks like if we put a systems lens on resilience in schools. If we think of your school system as groups of things that come together to create excellent educational outcomes, there are three main elements in the system. There's the structure, there's you personally, and the culture. It's worth noting here that systems thinking is a newer addition to the Ontario Leadership Framework. Let's start with the structure. As system and senior school leaders, I expect you spend an awful lot of time focusing on the structural aspect of the education system, the frameworks, the processes, the capabilities, and so on. From a resilience point of view, your priority here is to make sure that systems assist rather than inhibit people's resilience. As we all know too well, processes can often test our resilience big time. But that's another topic entirely, as I'd like to talk about the next element of the system, you. So what influence do you personally have on creating a resilient education system? Well, we know that how everyone shows up matters. Just one dementer, and I certainly hope that's not you, in a small team can quickly create pessimism. We all need to take personal accountability for being the very best version of ourselves. And so how do we do that? Well, we invest in our self-care, in our supports, we stay flexible in our thinking and so on. And it's interesting for me that despite a need for a systemic approach, most of the focus on resilience building seems to have been at this level, at this individual level. And certainly in our Resilience at Work toolkit, which I hope you get to explore, we do have an individual model as part of that, which explores the 7 components that create resilience at an individual level at work. As leaders, your personal influence is even greater, of course, because your actions set the scene for what's expected. Many of the qualities in the Ontario Leadership Framework relate to resilience. Being optimistic, reflective, proactive, and having a good level of problem-solving skill, emotional intelligence, self-efficacy, all of these attributes can help us role model resilient leadership. My first challenge to you today, though, is, will embracing these characteristics as leaders create resilience across the system? The first myth we need to bust in answering this is that these traits alone will not necessarily create resilience. We know that resilience is a dynamic state that shifts according to how we interact with what's happening around us. I like to think of it as a journey, not a destination. Personal attributes like optimism are very useful resources, and we'll give them a big tick. But like any resources, they have to be deployed appropriately. Have you worked with someone, for example, who's overly optimistic and sets unrealistic expectations of themselves or others? Do you know someone who's emotionally intelligent, but who uses it for manipulation, or who becomes so emotionally connected with aspects of their job, their performance suffers? I call these overdone strengths. It's certainly good to have these attributes, but we need to deploy them in different ways according to the challenges we face. Which brings me to the last important element of the school system, its culture. Research tells us that leaders have a significant impact on culture. When we apply this to resilience, part of this is ensuring you invest in your own resilience, as I've already discussed. But of equal importance is fostering resilience in the people you lead. To create resilient cultures in education, you need to align the actions of individuals, yourself as leaders, and teams. And this alignment is at the heart of our Resilience at Work toolkit, which we've researched. Within the Resilience at Work toolkit, we have a specific measure of team resilience, which is called the RAW team. And this scale came out of the understanding that a group of resilient people does not necessarily create a resilient team. In the same way that a group of exceptional Scottish rugby players may not win the World Cup, especially if they're playing Wales, there are additional factors that we need to pay attention to and actively work on with our teams. Interestingly, aspects critical to our personal resilience, such as job purpose and values, can actually create team conflict and damage our levels of resilience when there's misalignment with colleagues. How often have you struggled with people not being on the same page as you? This RAW team scale outlines 7 components and 22 subdimensions that teams need to invest in. It includes aspects like shared purpose and values, a sense of shared identity and belonging, adaptability, optimizing resources, a culture of support and cooperation, and so on. And we know that all of these subdimensions help build resilient team cultures. So in closing, my challenge to you is, how well are you investing in your own resilience? And critically, what does that look like from your team's perspective? Do your actions foster or detract from their resilience? For example, we all need optimism right now, but what level of this works? The leader aspect of our RAW toolkit helps explore this. Secondly, the other challenge is, what conversations are you facilitating with your teams around a collective understanding of what creates resilience in their unique circumstances? Every team is unique. Do you know what your team believes is needed right now? And are you having regular conversations on what you need to do together to embrace your challenges? Remember, resilience is a journey. It needs continued conversation around the things that matter. And finally, as system leaders, What check-ins do you have that ensure that the processes and structures you introduce add value rather than inhibit resilient cultures? As educational leaders, you provide the resilience roadmap for yourselves, your staff, your students, and your communities. Thank you so much for taking the opportunity to listen to this session today.